Hello, my name is Valerie Parente and I'm an author and a poet. I just came out with a new poetry collection called Moonchild Manifesto. It's this beautiful book, and Moonchild Manifesto is my third poetry collection, so I wanted to do some readings from it and some analysis of certain poems. I like to do it candidly by random. I know I did that with my first two poetry collections on YouTube, and I thought it was really fun and I looked forward to it in the day to do a nice poetry reading and analysis. So I'm gonna do that today by random and read the poems, just probably like 3 poems, and give you some background behind it and why certain lines are what they are, things like that. So let's see. Again, I'm just gonna randomly pick poems. I love this collection, and I'm just gonna be super random with what I choose. Okay, so, oh my god, I love so many of these. There's so many that I want to read. I'm gonna read The Spider Princess first. I just passed it. The Spider Princess. There once lived a spider princess, deep in the catacombs. The tombs were her kingdom, where she reaped what was sown. Some say she was enchanted, some say she was cursed, finding patterns in everything, making webs out of words. She conjures the ancient wisdom that belonged to the spiders, having studied their magic and all they've inspired. These webs that she made were connected to the dead, bound by silver cords to create spiritual webs. She sees the interconnection, all is eternal, all never ends. Like star maps and constellations, there's always a common thread. When loved ones came to grieve in the glorious underground shrine, the Spider Princess bestowed gifts, tapestries beyond space and time. Every mother, every father, every widow in the village came to the Spider Princess, begging to send a message. Over the years, the princess learned, more often than you'd expect, it wasn't the dead needing to be heard, it was the ones who were left. Just the words, "I'm okay, all is well, you can rest," were enough to relieve the living when she wove her silver webs. It was a heavy duty for sure, but the Spider Princess didn't mind. She knew how important words were for those who are still alive. This is one of my favorite poems that I've ever written. Something that is my favorite activity is to create a poem out of a mini short fantasy story. And I kind of see this poem as a short story. It's just something that I took, something aesthetically pleasing. This is what I did throughout Moonchild Manifesto. I would take something that I found aesthetically beautiful, like incense, sage, crystals, anything. In this case, spider webs. I really do love spider webs, and I think they're beautiful. And I tried to think to myself, what does a spider web mean to me? And I had in my head that I really wanted to write a poem called The Spider Princess. I didn't know what it would be about yet, but I knew I wanted to write a poem called The Spider Princess. And when I thought to myself, what does a spider web mean to me? The things that came together in my mind were messages. Webs that represent interconnection between people and souls, and in this case, life and death, and seeing them as messages. So when I thought to myself, I want there to be a spider princess, I thought, okay, so she weaves webs, and the first thing that came to mind was their messages from the dead. Or their messages for the dead. I'm sorry, from the dead. But let's go through certain lines. Let's talk about certain lines. So it starts, as a story. There once lived a spider princess deep in the catacombs. The tombs were her kingdom, where she reaped what was sown. I liked using the word reaped and sown, even though it is a saying that already exists. I liked using those words because this is about death, life and death and love, and reap very much brings that death connotation, and then reap what was sown, it really did have to do with the fact that she sows these webs. So some say she was enchanted, some say she was cursed, finding patterns in everything, making webs out of words. There's a lot of meanings in a lot of these poems, and when I think about the Spider Princess and certain lines, they tend to have multiple meanings. And I'm not going to give you everything away because I like you to find meaning on yourself and not have like all the bare bones to what it is. But This line, she finds patterns in everything, making webs out of words. That was an ode to being a writer, and webs out of words was my way of talking about, you know, creating magic and creating something magical and creating a message, making webs out of words. That's what that had to do with. It had to do with how I felt as someone who writes things and evokes an emotion. And finding patterns in everything, I see multiple meanings in that. Finding patterns in everything. Spider webs are pattern-like. Physically, they look like that. And the finding patterns in everything that the Spider Princess does is kind of like finding synchronicities in everything. And if you know what a synchronicity is, it's something that seems like a coincidence, but it seems so crazy that it actually happened and had this connection to another thing or event that you find meaning in it inherently. You just have to find meaning in it. You can't see it as just a coincidence. So finding patterns in everything is kind of like an ode to synchronicities and the connections. And for example, when it comes to love and life and death, I see a lot of things that remind me of loved ones that are like too coincidental and pattern-like to be true. And I think, well, that has to have meaning. Like when my dog first passed away, we've never seen hummingbirds ever at my house, ever. My dog passed away, my whole family's sitting at the dinner table crying, talking about Abby about 2 days later. And as we're talking about her and how much we love her and all the good things we remember about her, a hummingbird came to the window and tapped on it and stopped and stared at us. And that to me was a pattern and a coincidence that was too good to be true. And I found meaning in it. And we have never seen hummingbirds at my house ever. So that's kind of like, that's just something I think of now when I read finding patterns in everything, making webs out of words. It's a little sidetrack of a story, but things like that when it comes to life and death, things that you are like, that is too coincidental to not have meaning. I feel something inside and that therefore it has to have meaning. Okay, going on to the lines in The Spider Princess. She conjures the ancient wisdom that belonged to the spiders, having studied their magic and all they've inspired. These webs that she made were connected to the dead, bound by silver cords to create spiritual webs. Silver cords is something that I use to describe the webs and the thread and the magical, you know, weaving that spiders do. But silver cords is a term that does directly refer to the soul. So when people have out-of-body experiences, there is a term that is used called the silver cord, where you sometimes see a silver cord connect your soul as it hovers to the body. So silver cords, I believe, is by definition what connects the soul and the body. So that was relevant to this poem about life and death. The webs were like embodiments of those silver cords, just in a beautiful design that actually evoked a feeling and sent a message. So she sees the interconnection, all is eternal, all never ends. Like star maps and constellations, there's always a common thread. Another term that's common, no pun intended, common thread, but I thought it was really good and relevant when talking about spider webs. When loved ones came to grieve, in the glorious underground shrine, the Spider Princess bestowed gifts, tapestries beyond space and time, the webs. Every mother, every father, every widow in the village came to the Spider Princess begging to send a message. Over the years, the princess learned, more often than you'd expect, it wasn't the dead needing to be heard, it was the ones who were left. And that's something I do deeply believe, that once you are passed away, you are at peace, it's good, you do not need to worry anymore. The worry that exists from it, that arises from someone dying and from a loss, is only felt, I believe, by the people who are still left living. The pain is on the people who are left. The lack of peace is on the people who are left. Everything else is all good, eternal, and peaceful. At least that's my belief for those who have passed. And I thought to myself, exactly like what this says, is that oftentimes, if you ever have a dream or like a synchronicity that reminds you of someone who's passed and it feels like a message from someone, it's not because, I don't think it's because they needed to tell you something, they needed you to know information. I think it's because the people living needed to hear it. I think the dead are more than at peace and okay. So that's what this line is referring to. It wasn't the dead needing to be heard, it was the ones who were left. And this is what the spider princess realized as she made these beautiful tapestry spiderweb messages from the dead. And then it's specific. It says, just the words "I'm okay, all is well, you can rest" were enough to relieve the living when she wove her silver webs. It was a heavy duty for sure, but the spider princess didn't mind. She knew how important words were for those who are still alive. And isn't that true? I think words are very particular to human beings and humans that are obviously alive. Language is something that we use. It's the most important thing in my life. But I think souls don't need language. I think they just kind of, like telepathy. Souls, when they're just souls without a body, don't need language to understand each other. That's the hunch I get. And that's kind of what I was playing on when I wrote this. The spider princess, and this is like anyone, if anyone's a medium or feels like they have connections to the dead, you would think it would be a curse because people would constantly be badgering you. You'd also think it would be a gift because, oh my God, you get to see that there's life after death, blah, 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 all this beautiful stuff. You get to bring happiness to people, relief to people. But I think what it comes down to, I was trying to imagine what a spider princess would feel if she's like a medium, like a modern day medium. A spider princess, I think, would understand the weight of what she does. And when it gets down to the nitty gritty in this poem with the webs, with the messages, what it comes down to is that words are really important, language is really important, and communication is really important for the living, more than for those who have passed. So that's what the Spider Princess is about. It's got a lot of stuff going on that I'm not mentioning, but that's the stuff I want to explain when I'm talking about that poem, and that's one of my favorite poems. I found while writing Moonchild Manifesto that one of my favorite things to do is to, and I know I already said this, but make a poem out of a fantasy genre story, short story. So I would take something that was fantastical that I thought was cool, and I would just create a short poem about it that, was quick and told a story. This is 12 minutes long from just one poem, so I'm just going to read one more. One that, I'll read this one because a lot of people really like this one on my blog. I got a lot of likes on it, so it's very short. It's called The Moon and the Third Eye. They say the moon unlocks intuition. They say it knows and it listens to everything you have been wishing, quietly manifesting your third eye's vision. This is basically, I looked at the moon as inspiration for so many different ideas in Moonchild Manifesto and what the moon represented to me. The moon and the third eye is about, and it says it's about intuition, and it's about manifesting what your soul wants. And that's what the third eye's vision is in my mind. Third eye's vision is your desire as a soul, as a pure soul, spirit, no body, just whatever is the mind sits in. So it says, they say the moon unlocks intuition. I'm saying that. This is what I believe. They say it knows and it listens. It's always there. To everything you have been wishing, quietly manifesting your third eye's vision. The moon is just a representation. It's just a symbol of something that's always there, always hovering over us, always witnessing consciousness. And that's what the moon and the third eye is about. It's very literal. It's very matter of fact. It's just me connecting something that exists in nature, in space, in the grand beyond that makes no sense, called space, and me taking that object that's in space and relaying it to what I think holds a lot of consciousness, which is the third eye, and passion and desire and true meanings. And I do think you can manifest things with belief, not with thought. Thank God, because I have OCD and I think things that are not pleasant, but belief is different than thought. And I think if you really believe, you can manifest things. I've proven it to myself time and time again my whole life. So even as a child, I would say, I have no reason to believe this, but when I'm older, I have like pin straight hair. I'm like, when I'm older, I'm going to have long wavy hair. No reason to think that. My family doesn't have long wavy hair. And then like the second I hit like age 14, I got like curly wavy hair. That's a really not so profound example of manifesting things that you want, but that's just like one that I think is interesting because I was just a little kid with no reason to think that, but I believed. I'm like, well, it's gonna happen just because I want it to happen. But anyways, that's the moon in the third eye. This is only 15 minutes, so we'll read one more. Oh. There's so many in here that I love. Okay, I'm gonna read this. The Beauty of Darkness 1. There's a couple editions of The Beauty of Darkness, but The Beauty of Darkness 1. I find the most unwavering comfort in my dark moods because they remind me that I am human, just like you. So I wrote this in November, I believe. November 1st. I remember when I wrote this, where I was and everything, what was going on in the world. It was just me trying to understand why I think my inner darkness is so beautiful and why I'm so fascinated by people's inner darkness. And I was trying to make sense of it and think, well, I don't think it has anything to do with negativity. I think it's the opposite. I think I can find something positive in darkness all the time. Hence my motto, finding beauty in darkness, which is my slogan on my website and everything. But I was just trying to investigate that thought more and why I felt that way. And there are many ways I can say this. That's why The Beauty of Darkness has 1, 2. I think I have a 3 and a 4 for those. But The Beauty of Darkness 1 was just me thinking about, well, I like darkness because, and it says here, because it gives me comfort. So I find the most unwavering comfort in my dark moods because they remind me that I am human, just like you. Moods, darkness, the dark side of being a human is very relatable, and I feel a connection to other people when there's a feeling of sadness or frustration or any kind of like dark emotional state, not, something you would think is not a favorable emotional state, is just a reminder to me that I'm human, and that's very comforting to me. That really humbles me, that makes me feel very good, and I think it might have to do with the fact that I spent a good decade of my life being numb when I had anorexia, when it was really bad, because you wouldn't expect that simply the idea of not eating would completely turn you into just a shell of a human. You wouldn't think it would have that much of a psychological effect, but it did. It was so many years of my life lost to and couldn't feel emotion, couldn't feel anything because I was so numb and just stuck in my addiction of starving myself and hurting my body in that way. And I think when I feel a reminder that I'm human and alive and I have a pulse and I have needs, like a need to eat and a need for nourishment, things that make me feel human, even when they're not favorable and not fun, like dark moods, as it says, give me so much comfort because I went so long being numb and not feeling those things. And it was the absolute worst. And I never want to go back to that. But I learned a lot from it. And The Beauty of Darkness 1 is about comfort in darkness because it's a reminder that you're human. And that's, something we all relate to. We all can relate to each other with the fact that we undergo a human experience. And it's painful and it's tough, but that's part of the journey, I think. It needs to be that way. Because being numb and neutral and not feeling anything is not being alive. It's not being connected to anyone else. It's just, you're just stale and stagnant and nothingness. So there is beauty of darkness. So those are 3 poems. I hope you enjoyed them. Please consider buying Moonchild Manifesto if you liked those poems, because I do give them away for free on my website and from this video, just reading it to you. But I love these poems so much, and I really do think that it's worth owning if you are a fan of just poetry, or if you are interested in mental health and mental health awareness. The whole thing is about mental health, love and death, what makes us human, and taking certain symbols like a spider web and just finding profound meaning in it and using it as a metaphor for something so much bigger than us. So thank you for watching. Moonchild Manifesto is hard to find on Amazon, so I would suggest you just go to my website. That's valerieparente.com/shop. Moonchild Manifesto will show up at the top. All right, thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you later with other poems. Bye.